What's going on? Entrepreneur Rap episode 20. Alongside Brett Regan, I'm David Brickley. Looking a little different around here.
Notice anything different?
Yeah. If you've been with us the last 20 episodes or 19 episodes, you notice we no longer look like we're in a basement and a cable access show.
Yeah, a little bit of an upgrade that we like. We are going to be continuing to make changes, though, over the next several episodes, so stay tuned for that.
All right, so a lot to get into this morning. Ex-BuzzFeed staffers are bashing the company. Biz Stone is back at Twitter. I want to talk a little bit about the gig economy. Kickstarter has a blanket that is...
Kickstarter works.
L.A. Reid and Sony, Ford cutting jobs, and of course the quote of the week. But we will start with the ex-BuzzFeed staffer and how they're bashing the company. Did you see this at all?
I did not.
So
I wanted to be fresh.
yeah, so a couple of people that got let go at BuzzFeed ended up do what they do best, is make viral videos based on that. And if you want to throw these up on the screen, Auntie, the main one on YouTube right now has 9 million views, which is a pretty incredible amount of views for an ex-staffer kind of bashing the company. The second one that we're showing here has 3 million. And the third and final one I'll show you here has 4 million. So you're talking about a total of, 16 million views of ex-BuzzFeed staffers going to town.
Now,
on their former employer.
Are they talking poorly about BuzzFeed in these videos? The title doesn't really let you know
Essentially,
whether it's
they're saying
negative.
that, there was a few rules of BuzzFeed they didn't like. They weren't allowed to reply to comments on YouTube. They weren't really to be able to attach their name and credit to the videos they worked on. And then the producers at the company, to their opinion, lacked clear direction of where the company was going, or at least where the video series was going. So Variety had a pretty funny line that I liked, and they said, ironically, they're making Why I Left BuzzFeed videos because BuzzFeed has trained them to focus on creating stuff that can go viral. So you train all these people to make viral content, and then when you let them go, or if they decide to leave, they can pretty much use that against you.
What did you think about their opinions on not being able to have credit and not being able to comment? Is that fair?
Well, it leads into the segment we'll do a little bit later in the show, the gig economy. I just think right now, if you're asked to create a YouTube channel, create a TV series, after a little bit of time, I think you start to get a little protective of that series. You want more credit. You've put blood, sweat, and the tears into something, and I think eventually certain people say, wait a second, why don't I just do this on my own? And if they have the financial backing or they have a little bit of wiggle room, they're able to do that. They'd rather do it for themselves than do it for the big parent company, BuzzFeed.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I certainly see that. It does seem like for BuzzFeed is a network like any other network, and if they're paying salaries for people to create content, I can see where, you'd want to have controls and restrictions. In some certain senses, we have those on people claiming credit for work that we're doing for other clients.
Yeah.
So I can kind of see where they may be frustrated, but also, if you're working for a major network and they're paying you a full-time salary to create content for them, ownership is certainly going to go down, because you're not risking it to go out on
especially in
your own.
radio. When it gets to syndicated radio, a lot of these guys later on in their career, they negotiate the rights in order to own their content. So at Howard Stern, when he left terrestrial radio, he still owned all the previous logs of every show he's ever done, so he can replay that wherever he goes. That's usually when you're in the game for 5-10 years, the Secrets of the World, Howard Stern.
And he had to pay for that, or that's something that was the initial deal?
I don't know if it's an initial deal when they restructured the contract, but essentially, and it makes sense. Like if you're, I don't know, Conan O'Brien goes to TBS and he can never air anything that he ever did on NBC. When they say, let's go back 20 years and show this,
yeah,
that all stuff has to be worked into the contract. So I think when you have a little bit of leverage going into a contract negotiation, you can try to throw that in there. But I'm starting to see more of people, if they're creating content and they're not getting all the credit and they don't own it, it causes friction for some people.
Yeah, and I can see for some of the longer format series, a lot of what BuzzFeed does is definitely content farming.
Yep.
So if they're
telling
telling
you
you,
quantity over
if
quality,
they're telling you, look, hey, Tasty works, we
Kick
need you
them
to
out.
make all this
Yeah.
stuff over and over and over, then maybe really somebody doesn't have the, they shouldn't really have the authority to have a lot of ownership over that.
One former BuzzFeed creator said, the fact that BuzzFeed owns all the intellectual property its creators produce begin to scare me. Do I give them my best ideas? Later in life, I may want to use those ideas for something, so I won't be able to do them, which is interesting. You have a job, they're paying you a salary. It just goes back to the whole employee-employee relationship. And from a BuzzFeed standpoint, we're paying your salary. Can you please do a good job? Like, I'm going to hold a bunch of ideas just in case I want to start my own YouTube channel one day. That's kind of a tough.
I mean, anybody in similar, more, I guess, longer term business models like Ford. Do I want to develop the nicest car for Ford, or should I save these ideas and start my own car company, or Google, or Intel?
So your point
there's
is
a lot of
every
people that are
business is
creators that are on salary to create something, but if you're at Pfizer and you say, maybe I'll save my best drug, ideas for when I start my own pharmaceutical company, they own your intellectual property while they're there and they're compensating you. If it's not enough, then definitely leave.
So if
you feel like you have all these concepts that you can today leave and go start, of course, but I don't think BuzzFeed is specifically in some sort of weird market where that's the case. There's a lot of creative or intellectual property type positions that people probably feel the same way.
Yeah, and then finally, if you're at BuzzFeed though, and 10 of your employees leave and all create these viral videos that amass to almost 20 million views, do you care? Would you expect that? Are you going to put it in your employee contract so they can't do those type of videos afterwards?
I don't think that you could say that. Now, if you couldn't go out and say, hey, this is tasty, because they own that, and maybe there's some way of saying, here's how the video.
And it's a brilliant move for them if they want to go on their own and create their own channels, and they have this following to create their own channel and start with this bombshell, which is it goes viral and there's going to be PR around it. So it's smart if they want to start their own channel. Which
only so many of them are going to be able to come out of the gate getting 2, 3, 9 million views that could potentially then replace their previous income.
Yep.
But to be able to go in and crank all day, every day, and know that there's a paycheck, but it's very hit or miss, in the content game. So out of everybody that leaves BuzzFeed to start their own mini BuzzFeed, I would say a small percentage will be able to replace their
And my last thought on this is I think this is going to be something you're going to see a lot more often, especially bigger companies, especially if they have to do layoffs. ESPN, the 100 staffers, on-air personalities,
that's a network.
That's a network, but I think a lot of those, they can't take another job if they want to get their contract paid out. But I think there's going to be a little bit of this type of thing going on in the future, especially with big companies, because it's going to get covered. PR.
If you fire 100 people, out of those 100 people, could they start a smaller network to compete with you? Absolutely.
Not even so much that, but I'm talking about why I left ESPN or my thoughts on ESPN after they fired me. People now have an outlet to air their grievances. 20 years ago,
that's
maybe
a good point.
you send a letter to the editor at your local newspaper, but it's not going to go anywhere. So on to the next one.
On to the next one. So Biz Stone is back at Twitter. We've talked a lot in a lot of different scenarios here about, Twitter is not doing the projected growth that they'd hoped. The share price has dropped and spiked back up and dropped again. But overall, a lot of volatility at Twitter, but it doesn't seem to be going away. So it seems like there's a foundational point of Twitter where the people that are on Twitter are not going to be stopping using Twitter because it still has a place in social. It's very different than Snap and Facebook. So Biz Stone coming back in, he's rejoining since his 2011 departure. At that point in time, Twitter was privately held, and Stone did retain a significant amount of equity, so he still has a vested interest.
And didn't Jack Dorsey leave and come back as well?
Jack Dorsey did. He was the CEO of Square, and then he came back to be the CEO of both Twitter and Square.
So far, nothing's changed.
Foursquare or Square.
I think Foursquare.
Foursquare.
Yeah.
So upon the news that Biz Stone is back, shares bumped up 2%. A little background on him since leaving Twitter. He started Medium, which I did not know.
Interesting.
The publishing platform, which is pretty popular and growing in user base.
I think financially, though, they haven't found a way to make money out of it. But it
sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Then he started Jelly, which is a user-generated Q&A where users are answering questions, which I'd never heard of, but apparently they were just
about it. You know about Jelly? Yeah.
They were just sold to Pinterest this year. So he's definitely been busy. He's still in the game. Clearly has fresh ideas.
Well, and the good thing about Twitter, they had some unexpected Q1 results that, it was 6%, but their monthly and daily active users bumped up. That shot their stock price up 14%. And then Mark Cuban recently just bought a bunch of Twitter stock, which increased it another 5%. So, I mean, what's it been, 4 straight years of down numbers every single quarter,
right,
and the stock shareholders being up in arms about how bad they're doing. But Q1, finally, they have a little bit of positive.
But I think that's almost a
news to share.
reflection of the market will say, we think Twitter is going up and up and up forever. And the share price shoots up really high. And then after you start seeing like, well, that's not sustainable. And then the projections start to get a little more realistic. So now I think they're at a level where people look at it and say, okay, at this price point, I'm a buyer if it goes too much lower. So I think now it's almost leveled off a bit, where I do think you'll start seeing Twitter behave like a properly priced company, which most are. But that's where with something like a Snapchat, the volatility could be crazy, because who knows? Is it 10 billion less? Is it 10 billion more?
Yeah.
Like, it could spike either direction.
And with their, I think, digital upfronts or Twitter upfronts, they launched their 24/7 sports network. They talked a lot about their different live streaming rights deals that they have at their disposal now. So that's also one reason, I guess, Twitter's trending in the right direction. And then Mark Cuban, the reason he bought stock was the AI capabilities. They talked a lot in their upfronts about the AI potential of the platform, which I guess he said if they can do that, they can do some good things.
Sure. So Biz Stone in his new role will be focused on culture, both internally and externally. I guess
Biz Stone and
the
Jack
culture.
Dorsey, they started Twitter essentially?
Yeah, I think there were 4 total, but those 2 are still involved. But here's a quote from Stone upon his
And who's making these
reemergence.
decisions at this level? The board at Twitter brings back CEOs and stuff?
I mean, the board would decide who needs to come back and help with things, but in this particular case, he has no obligation to come back. But as a major shareholder, it's in his best interest to try to come back. Plus, he's just sold his company and he started Medium, and what's next? He can start another venture, but after 2, maybe he looks and sees like, hey, I've got all this money riding on Twitter. It's still relevant. Can I come back, focus on culture, make it better for the employees after a huge retention problem? It seems like every 30 days there's a major executive leaving Twitter.
Yeah, and after, a half a decade of it just being Twitter, how can you make it cool all over again for new users and a new generation almost?
But I want to end on a quote from Biz Stone on his re-emergence. Twitter has woven itself into the fabric of our global society. The world needs Twitter, and it's here to stay. So it'll be interesting to see what he does in his new position.
Well, you can talk down on Twitter all you want, but there's just no other platform. The one thing they have no competition in is the real-time access, and we always use the famous Egypt uprising example. But when you're watching the Super Bowl, there's no other platform to be able to engage with people on a second-by-second basis than Twitter. So they have that market carved out for them. It's just a matter of being able to capitalize on it.
And they got Trump.
Yeah, you got the leader of the free world.
It's important.
So kind of going back to the BuzzFeed topic, I want to talk a little bit about the gig economy. And it wasn't really a topic I knew that they defined, but I was listening to a podcast, the Richard Deitch podcast from SI.
Okay.
He interviewed Bob Lee from ESPN, who's been there since like the beginning, 1979. And Bob Lee hosts Outside the Lines. He said something interesting. He said, I've been here for 30 years. That's just not going to exist in the future. I don't think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be staying at companies for 30 plus years. And he talked about the gig economy and how there's less gateholders now, especially in media. Back in the day, if you don't get a job from NBC, CBS, and ABC, you're kind of SOL. But now, let me start my own YouTube channel, Facebook Live. We all know the different platforms. So 35% of total U.S. workforce right now are freelancers. And I think
25%?
35. And I think with our company, even doing some different productions on site, especially when we go to the East Coast, being able to outsource and find people that are really experts in their field, whether it's a director of photography, whether it's a audio guy or a lighting guy, it just makes more sense to fire those people up in times of need, more so than having a lighting guy on set 40 hours a week. So kind of wanted to open up in your thoughts on how we use employees versus freelancers, and also what the employee looks like in 10 years.
So there's a million different directions you can go for this, but I think, partially the reason why this is the case now is because there's so many marketplaces where if you want to be your own, independent contractor, have a small business, be a freelancer, however you call it, there's a million different little marketplaces where you can go and do that. Elance if you want to do development. If you want to be a jewelry designer, you can go on Etsy. Fiverr is out there. Uber is out there. There's all these places now where you can easily sell your goods and services with very little overhead.
Well, and how about companies like Uber? There's a new app called Handy for handymen to come fix, repair stuff. All they do is they background check and quality check 1099 contractors. So their overhead, they don't have to have any employees, just like Uber. They just kind of do the background check and they tell the market, hey, these people we trust, you can trust to come into your home.
Yeah.
And that's a business model now. It's like no employees, we just background check people and let you know, here's the peer-to-peer network almost.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Craigslist or
TaskRabbit.
eBay, eBay's a great example too. They don't buy or sell anything necessarily.
Yeah,
it's a
that's right.
marketplace where people can do that and they feel like it's the one area where they can go. But if you need something, I feel like I can buy a car on eBay and I'm not going to get screwed because they've got a long background. So because of all of these marketplaces, and it's not just because they're creating the marketplaces because they should, the Wall Street is really incentivizing people to start these marketplaces because the user bases are incredibly valuable. So it's made it a lot easier. There's people that for free, if you're a creator, you can pretty much go and sell your goods and services in a million different places. So I think that's been a big part of it. It's just easier. 30 years ago, if you wanted a new job, you may be looking in the classified ads, you may go get a recruiter, it was maybe word of mouth, but now if you really just wanted to look, even if you're happy with your job, going to Monster,
LinkedIn.
a marketplace where it takes people who need jobs with people who need, employees and putting those together. So it's the barrier of entry to getting a job or starting your own business has become so much easier that I think people will want to move and shift a lot more. But also the market moves so fast that as a company, unless you're incredibly flexible and able to pivot constantly, then you'll probably go out of business. So the fact that there are so many people that are crazy specialized that you can go tap for projects when you need them and not have your payroll getting sucked down,
And
it's
again,
amazing.
with the information agent, like you mentioned, where you can just go to monster.com, from an employer's standpoint, back in the day, it'd probably be very hard to find a technical director that you known and trusted, but now you can Google it.
Yeah,
Or
just
go on LinkedIn.
just as a baseline, the
Yeah.
internet period has made it so
Changes
much
the
easier
game.
to find people and for them to find you.
Well, from a business owner standpoint, though, if you're doing 12 projects a year, one big event per month, I mean, do you look at it? I mean, how do you balance like needing employees full time versus let me just fire up these trusted technical directors and producers on site when I need them? Could you technically have a company? You could technically have a $15 million company that had 0 employees, and you just fired them up every other Tuesday when you needed them for your big events.
Yeah, I do think in a certain, the market does a good job of equalizing that out to where it's very apparent. So we've looked at, cost benefit analysis on, hey, we've got X number of independent contractors in this one area. Here's the total number of hours they're working, and here's the price.
Yeah.
Could we go get a full-time person that would be more productive at that rate? The answer sometimes is yes, sometimes is no, and that's how we make that decision. But a DP for a project is going to be more expensive per hour, per day than a full-time employee would be. So because they're charging that premium, because they're flexible and they're
It just
charging
depends
their
on how
rate.
much you need that service.
Yeah.
If you need a DP every single day, you have to hire it in-house.
Yeah, and if you do hire it in-house, you get a deal because you're locking into potentially, multiple years of steady income, where if it's a 1 gig, 2 gig, and we treat our clients the same way. If somebody came to us and said, hey, we need this from you every single week, all the time, and we can plan on it and we can set things up. It's a lot easier for us to plan that out. If somebody comes to us and said, hey, we need you for 1 day and we may never need you again, then to be able to go through all that and spike up all the resources, we have to charge a premium. So I do think, if it's not consistent, then it always makes sense to have independent contractors, freelancers. But if you don't have your core team of project managers and administrators in-house, that's when I think things can get really hairy and you wind up
That's
being
what I'm
a
starting to
project
realize.
manager.
I think from an employer standpoint, you definitely need those account managers, project managers in-house because there's so many calls and whiteboard sessions and meetings that you have. But those specialized areas, like I said, if you need someone that's really good at audio for an on-set location production shoot, you probably just don't need that person full-time regardless of how many events you have per month.
Yeah, and it depends on what kind of company you want, but I actually think that there's probably a hole in the market right now for people that aren't specialized but are great project managers that are happy to do the work themselves. Could you once a quarter manage a project for, one of the networks and make a living yourself? Probably. So I even think that there's going to be some people that are just straight project managers that, maybe call themselves a production company. They do a few events throughout the year. It's a big pain in the neck. They got to hire all these other people that they know of in the industry. And so they wouldn't have a lot of overhead and a lot of additional people. But to make a living, I think they could do it.
Yeah, to make it, I think you make a good point, though. The internet just has changed the game in that regard for both the worker and the person that wants to employ the worker. Because, again, we can go find a specialized person. At the same time, if you market yourself the right way, you can go find the areas of need that need your service and pitch yourself as well. So it opens up the whole game, and that's the whole gig economy.
And when we're looking for new full-time positions, you're going to get a lot more than just the one person who you choose. And we've done, I think, a good job of asking everybody that's in a technical field,
like, interested,
hey, we chose somebody else for the full-time position. Would you be interested or open to freelance contract work, what have you? And most have been pretty receptive. And they'll say, like, hey, you can never really plan, which that's, part of the problem is you can't just bookmark them for whenever you need them because they might be busy, but they're open to it. And we've actually offered potential full-time positions to people that are saying, like, I'm really killing it in the freelance zone, so it's not really worth it for me to take a pay cut.
And it makes it valuable for a company like ourselves to have the network of people. So if person one that you want to use on a project isn't available, if you have someone very similar in skill set to be able to activate, just kind of having that ecosystem of people that you can reach out to is more valuable almost than a 80-person staff.
I totally agree, because then that turns our company into the marketplace. Because in the same way that LinkedIn has people who need jobs and people that need employees, we have clients who need work, and we have a huge ecosystem of people that can do it, plus we project manage the whole thing.
Yeah.
So it turns ourselves into a little bit of a marketplace of executors, and I think that's where our value comes from.
All right, so in your opinion, Kickstarter works, I'll have to agree, but a specific example that blew your socks off, I think.
Yeah, so over the last several years, I've seen, hey, check out this new fun product on Kickstarter. And oftentimes it'll be something hokey or goofy. Occasionally it'll be something that's really, interesting or revolutionary. But there are two concurrently that are on Kickstarter right now that got my attention, not so much because of the product, but because of the amount of money that they've raised. So, Auntie, if you want to start rolling some of this background. The first of the two examples is called a gravity weighted blanket.
Have you ever tried one of these, by the way?
So yes, my mother came to me like 2 months ago and said she wanted to start a weighted blanket company. And
she's a nurse, and that's actually helps with stress.
Yes, so she's a nurse for pediatrics, and some of the kids, this is really helpful for them. So she, went to a Chinese distributor and got, a few of them made, and we're kind of working in the background on a Shopify store. But as all that's going down, this Kickstarter campaign came out for the gravity blanket. I think I first saw it on social from Futurism or Mashable or something like that, but it got a ton of press. So Auntie, if you want to fast forward to what they were asking for and what they've raised thus far. So,
Jesus.
They were looking for $21,500 as their goal for funding. And right now, with 13 days to go, they're at $3.6 million.
So that's people pre-ordering the blanket.
Pre-buying.
But what makes this blanket different? There's got to be another blanket on the market that.
If you search weighted blankets right now, you can buy them on Amazon.
So what's so different about this one?
Kickstarter. And that's what I think.
But why would you pre-order something that's not there if you could just go to Amazon right now and buy one? You have no idea.
I don't know. It doesn't make any sense because these are all back ordered.
That's funny.
You have a pretty long wait to get this gravity blanket where you could go and buy one today.
That's so weird.
But they had pretty good marketing. And I actually think in this particular case, they assumed that they would get a lot more than 21,000 because just the marketing that they put into it, the video is really high end, all the branding is good. The name Gravity is probably not super cheap, and I believe it's like gravity.com and not gravity weighted blankets. Huh. I could be wrong on that.
You know what I mean? Like it's like a Kickstarter about an ice chest, and you can just go get an Igloo at your local CVS like today, but people are pre-ordering. I mean, because that's weird. It's the power of marketing.
Yes, so I really think that now people look at Kickstarter as a way that you can get probably way more funding than you could anywhere else, as long as it's the right product for that market and there's the right people behind it. But I want to go into the second one here, because this is another great example of what I look at to be like a perfect Kickstarter product. So Auntie, you want to roll this one? So this is called the Romp Him. So there's the Romper, and now this is the Romp Him. This is clearly mostly a joke, but I think that they'll sell a ton of these. There's a mutual friend of ours who I think would definitely buy this and wear it all summer. Ryan Ward. Because he likes to be goofy. So in the past, there used to be like gimmicky products that you would see on infomercials. I think the probably most recent one is Snuggie. The Snuggie was a huge hit, not because it was a smart idea, but because it was so dumb. It was a gag gift that people gave each other, but they sold a ton. And that's what I think we're
like
seeing
the
here.
shake weight was kind of in that same arena as well.
Exactly. Shake weight, nobody bought that or used it for actual
get ripped,
exercise.
yeah.
It was just a funny motion and a joke. So I really do believe now, if you are starting out and you have a product that is a good fit for the Kickstarter audience, if you were to maybe take $10,000 or $20,000 aside for branding and a huge PR push prior to your Kickstarter
Totally
campaign, get it on Kickstarter, and then get Mashable, pay them to talk about it, you could make back that money times 50
And
pretty
it's like,
easily.
I really believe that even if it's a halfway decent idea, I think the two examples you showed and the ones that I've seen succeed, they have incredible videos. And if you can get that 90-second or 60-second video to really tell your story, even if it's an inspirational story about what you want to do and only have 4 mock-ups at the end, that's really the meat of it. If you can get the great video, write a business plan, and get some great copy in there, I almost feel like the barrier of success is somewhat low.
I totally agree. If it's the right product, and either the Romp Him or the Gravity Blanket, did they really need to go get funding through CrowdShare? Or could they have gone to somebody and gotten $21,000 for a small chunk of equity?
And
Gravity could have walked into anybody and gotten 10, 20, 50, 100 grand and been off to the races.
Yeah, but they have to give equity of their company away.
Even a loan, $21,000 they couldn't get. They could go to SBA and get that.
Yeah.
So Kickstarter was really a large portion of their marketing go-to-market strategy, and it's worked amazingly.
The number one story on Kickstarter of all time is the Pebble smartwatch. They asked for $500K and got $21 million. But
did it ever go to market?
One thing, I'm not sure, but one thing that you and I both loved when we first saw it on Kickstarter was Plastic, which was a credit card where you could upload all your credit cards to, including your key fob for your apartment or work. All it took was one card. You made a good point that I think Apple Pay kind of hit them a little bit.
Yep.
But they raised $9 million in pre-orders, and here's the problem with crowdfunding: they raised $9 million, just like that weighted blanket did, went out of business. So from a crowdfunding standpoint, if you drop that $150 to pledge your donation, doesn't mean you're getting the product.
No, but I mean, there's still a sense of like community that you backed this company.
That happened with My Lily too, which was a drone that can go through water, come in and out of water, and my uncle pre-ordered
never went to
it.
market.
Never went to market. They sent a big email like, sorry.
But with all the talk about entrepreneurship and investing, people look at this and say, like, if they don't hit their goal, then all the money comes back. And if they do hit their goal, in most cases, we get our product. So it's going to be pretty rare, I think, on Kickstarter where it's like you pledge your money, but like in most cases, it's all upside because you either buy a product or you get your money back.
You know what's big too is like card games, like Magic Kingdom card games or what have you. I mean, they've asked for 3,000 and got $1 million too. That's that market they've been able to hit. But it makes you want to like just whiteboard out 6 random ideas, throw it up there with a $10,000 goal, and see if one.
I agree. Just put the videos behind it and then see how they sell. But I really think ahead of like Christmas, Halloween, and making like gimmicky products that work towards those. Have them spike. Everybody buys it for that. It's gone next year, but a bunch of base hits just to like, kind of test and experiment. But I want to read some Kickstarter overall stats. So $3,047,000,000 total dollars pledged. 124,000 plus successfully funded projects, over 12 million, almost 13 million total backers, and 38 million total pledges.
Yeah, and I think Kickstarter was the original peer-to-peer crowdfunding. What's the other one? GoFundMe.
There's GoFundMe.
It's more for, like, my aunt has cancer and she raised like almost $5,000. Another one of my friends who is sick as well, I think almost got 30,000 for like experimental treatment. So a way too for your friends and family to be able to like have one place to donate rather than sending checks in the mail to the family. So
yeah, and it seems like both of them have found their place, because you wouldn't assume
Kickstarter's not medical.
Kickstarter's not the place for like a, hey, my kid needs surgery, or hey, I want to go meet my long lost lover and I can't afford it kind of thing.
Yep.
But GoFundMe is good for that, and it gives people the opportunity with a little bit of extra money to feel like they're part of something good. So it's interesting, but another cool marketplace that matches people that want to pledge money with people who need funding, or at least claim to need funding, but totally successful for companies that use it in the right way.
All right, so one story that shocked you and I was L.A. Reid out at Sony. And those of you that don't know who L.A. Reid is, he was in a R&B group. He then started a record company with Babyface. Remember the great Babyface, R&B singer. Then he had a stint, I believe, he worked with Outkast, which won a bunch of Grammys in 2004, was this incredible couple of years there. Then worked with Kanye, Rihanna, Justin Bieber, and then his last 5 or 6 years at Epic, he's worked and brought on Future, Travis Scott, DJ Khaled, Meghan Trainor, Fifth Harmony, and kind of revived Mariah Carey's career as well. So the guy, wherever he goes, success seems to follow. And the number one song in the country right now is from his label as well.
Yeah, and you can't just call it luck that he got all those people and brought them in. That's a really impressive acquisition strategy over the last several years.
Relationships, like I'm going to go wherever L.A. Reid goes, it seems like.
Yeah, and I mean, his name almost supersedes Sony. I think when people think about where am I going, it's like, sure, it's Sony, sure, it's Epic, but really, I'm going where L.A. Reid is, because he's got a really long track record.
So the article came out in Variety, I think, and just said L.A. Reid out at Sony. He resigned, and you and I are like, what? Like, just because of all his success and being somewhat close to the industry. But then it comes out yesterday that there was some alleged sexual misconduct of harassment with his assistant, I believe. Again, all alleged, but damn, with Bill O'Reilly and all these different stories you're hearing with Uber. And we've talked on this podcast about sexual harassment training and all that, but I mean it is alleged, of course, but damn, it's tough out there.
Yeah, and I mean, our initial thought, it was confusion a little bit for
I don't know why I didn't think that in the first place. I mean,
it seemed really odd that he would just get up and leave in the middle of like
all that success,
a really great successful run. But yeah, you gotta, I guess, stay on your P's and Q's and understand the rules, and do your job, and that's it, because you can ruin a great career over something stupid.
So L.A. Reid's camp said the letter that the female assistant sent contained inaccuracies, of course. Supposedly in the letter, she said she complained to a higher-ranking Sony executive about the harassment, and she was told, quote, before you say anything more, think about what that means for you. Just think about what it means for you. So if that is true, kind of saying like, if you come out with these statements, you're going to be fired or whatever, obviously some type of threat. But, if let's say it's not true, I remember listening to an interview with 50 Cent. He said, since I've been in the public eye, I've been in a lawsuit every week, every month, every year. There's never been a time I've never been in a lawsuit. I remember that Chris Brown and Drake incident where they threw bottles in a club at one point. Like 25 different people at the club sued, both of them.
I think Ray Allen included, right?
Yeah, but for emotional distress and a slice on maybe on a wrist. So I want a couple million just in case I lose a little bit of feeling. I mean, it's this litigious society. If this is true, obviously it's terrible and he should be punished, and it's good that he resigned. But regardless, you have to watch out because people are looking out for you.
Yep, and I mean that's if it's true, the guy's got to go. Sony, it's pretty clear that not only is it the right thing to do from a business decision, advertisers are pulling out if there's stories
the
about
thing.
this.
So-
So you got to nowadays, if the story comes out, you're gone.
Well, that's the thing. So that was a good point you just made, because Bill O'Reilly, obviously there's like 7 different cases, and it makes more sense to let him go. But even the Stephen Colbert thing, he says one bad joke, people don't like it. The hashtag Fire Colbert is all over Twitter. And to your point, if anybody even alleges without absolutely not a shred of evidence, a big company like Sony, they can't take the PR hit on that, because it's not innocent until proven guilty anymore. It's really the PC cops going after you and believing in any allegation. So to your point, even if he's totally innocent, Sony almost has to cut ties just to avoid the PR rap.
Well, because I mean, court cases take a long time, and from Sony's just purely business-minded, mindset,
Yeah.
you look like, do I want to
not gonna be
have something
dragged
about
through this for 2
Sony sexual harassment, Sony lawsuits, Sony
Yeah.
all this stuff? Get rid of them because it's just not worth it.
Yeah, and they do say that it's cheaper to defend a unlawful termination lawsuit than it is to defend even a sexual harassment suit that has no evidence behind it. So
Yeah.
that's business for you.
Okay.
All right, moving on to Ford.
So Ford cutting jobs 10% globally across the board. Under normal circumstances, this wouldn't really make it to my top 3 stories. But because of the atmosphere that Trump has created specifically for the auto industry, where right after the election visited, all the major automakers, has been to Detroit saying you
was
cannot move things to Mexico.
Yeah, was it Chevy or Ford that he supposedly saved a factory to
Ford.
Ford.
So
they were going to move to Mexico.
Going to move to Mexico. They didn't created 700 jobs in Michigan, and that was a big, plus. But it's a really interesting time right now for automakers, because they now have to please 2 different people. Beforehand, all they had to really care about is Wall Street. If you're growing, if you're cutting costs, whatever quarterly, returns you're getting, if they're better than projected, then you are compensated by Wall Street. Now they have to contend with DC in a way that they never had to before. So they've really got to look at it and say, okay, do I piss off the president, who might tweet about us poorly and give us really bad PR that could affect our share price, or do we do something that's not good for our bottom line and piss off Wall Street that's going to negatively affect our share price? And it looks like, to me, Ford has made a decision here by cutting 10% of the workforce. Now, keep in mind, it is global, but people in the U.S.
10%,
will lose.
How many jobs is that? That's got to be 10,000?
They didn't list in the article that I had.
How many employees
the
does
total.
Ford have? It's got to be.
Should have had that information, but they're looking for $3 billion in cost savings. Now, the $3 billion in cost savings could lead to a huge spike in share price, because Wall Street will say, good for you, we like your company, you're cutting costs,
Look at
you're
all
making
these
decisions.
retail stores that are falling, though. I mean, this is what we saw a couple of years ago with Sears and all these different stores. Like, we're going to, cut jobs and try to spike back up. I feel like every time you cut that many jobs, you're kind of already, it's almost too late, but maybe not.
So part of the issue here is that a lot of the profits from, revenue here are being put towards future goals. So fully autonomous vehicles, fully electric vehicles, that's the long-term gain. And will that be really important for Ford moving forward? If they don't take all of that money that they're earning right now and put it towards these future projects, then they're done anyway. But by taking all of the money that could be going to shareholders and putting it towards something that may not earn any money in the future and may be a lost cause anyway, that's scary for a shareholder. Because you say, look, you're making the money on all these F-150s, they're selling like crazy.
Yeah.
We want that money, don't take it and put it into something that you're probably going to get beat by Google and Tesla on anyway. So stock price down at Ford 40% since mid-2014. But I really look at this as an incentives problem. And right now, they've got positive incentives by Wall Street to cut, to make things cheaper, to cut their workforce, to be a more nimble company, because their share price will go up. And all they've got on the Trump side is negative. So if they cut jobs, and he'll put out a tweet that it's BS, and when they moved all these jobs from Mexico to Detroit, Trump claimed it as a victory for himself, but they didn't get any subsidies based on that.
Yeah,
So unless there's some sort of written in
And I think
incentive
Trump
on the
just wanted
positive
that
side.
headline, and I mean, that's all he cared about. So
Yeah, so
he got what he needed.
Ford did that. They maybe got a blip of okay press for a second, but probably not. I don't think people were like, oh man, I'm buying a bunch more Fords now, and clearly that wasn't the case.
Well, one thing too, when I saw this story and that you were going to bring it up, I was just curious with Uber and all this ride sharing, how that potentially is affecting people in new vehicles. And a study came out that it really isn't. Less than 1% are now not buying vehicles because they can just use Uber or Lyft to get the point A to point B. And 57% of U.S. drivers have not used a rideshare, have not used Uber and Lyft. So I think since we're in San Diego, we use LA and New York, we're in these different big cities, and Uber just is a obvious no-brainer. Smaller cities, especially Midwest, and even smaller cities outside of the LAs of the world, just don't use it as much. Because I thought that may have been part of the reason why Ford and some of these auto companies are having a tough time, but less than 1% not buying cars because of that.
Yes, but the writing's on the wall. I think anything starts in the coastal cities and then moves inward. So first it will be the ride sharing stuff, but now even places like Nashville that didn't have it earlier, and now everybody's using Uber.
Yep.
And I would assume Austin, Texas, and Denver, and so you start to get into where there's people really using them, and it takes longer, and that will probably be the case with the autonomous vehicles eventually, but every car company is looking at that as the future and knows that if they don't get it on that, then they're gone completely.
Yeah.
But I will say, so this is one piece of advice that I'll give to anybody who cares to listen to it.
Not many. Just kidding.
But I really do think that, my daughter will not be driving a car in 16 years. I don't assume that she'll go and get a license and have a car and drive it herself. It'll either be an autonomous car or it'll be ride share everything. And partially public transportation will continue to get better, hopefully. I think, Elon Musk will prove with some of these tunnels that he's digging in LA that it's possible to have a new functioning public transportation
I think it just
system.
depends on how financially able it is, because right now you could buy a somewhat decent old Honda Civic for $1,000, and as long as you put the puppy with $50 of gas per month, you can get to a lot of places for $50 or $1,000 for the total of the car. So I think ride sharing would have to be a lot more cheaper, or there's going to have to be cheaper alternatives.
Well,
for
but it's
the
also
working class.
gasoline is going to go up in price.
Yeah.
It's not an unlimited resource. It costs a lot of money to be able to go drill and find oil and all this other crap. We are, importing so much of it from other places in the world that have total control over
I guess
the pricing.
my point is that let's say someone gifted you a car for $2,000 and it's a decent, reliable vehicle. You can get around to work and back into a bunch of different places to the store for probably less than $100 if you stay within your community and you live close to work.
If you have a $2,000 car, but there's a lot of people that just don't want the BS.
No, I know, but I'm saying from a ride-sharing standpoint, to get to home and work and back, I mean, that alone is going to take $20 every single trip. It's just going to be extrapolated.
Yeah, I agree, but I think as the technology gets better,
It'll be cheaper.
Transportation is going to get cheaper.
Yeah.
It's going to get cleaner, it's going to get cheaper, and I think long term, a driver car is going to be a big time status symbol. So a brand new Mercedes right now will never become a classic. There's too much computer stuff going on, but like a 57 Chevy in 25 years, when everybody's got cars that look like exactly the same and click in together and is almost like your own little
I don't know if
box
I agree.
car.
16 years, I think, our parents thought there was going to be flying vehicles in the year 2000. So I think 16 years may be a little young in 25.
I don't think so.
You think 16 years your daughter will not have to get a driver's license?
No, I don't. I don't think there's any way that transportation will be the same. And it's not just because of the technology. It's also because, driving is the #1 way that people in the United States die, I think, or at least top 3. So it's really dangerous.
75 people a day.
And for teenagers, it's incredibly dangerous to drive, especially with all the technology that's going on. So I really do think
I will say my cousins, my younger cousins that had just turned 17, 18, they just never got their driver's license.
And depending on the city, like you're right. In certain areas, like, you'll have to drive because you're, 20 miles away from school or whatever. in the Midwest, but in major metropolitan cities, in Los Angeles and San Diego and San Francisco and New York and Chicago, people will not be driving on the roads. It's going to improve traffic. So if you do take out your, classic car, I think if you buy a bunch of classic cars right now, their stock price will go up substantially over the next 25 years.
Over under 16 years, you're going to go under. I'm going to go over.
I think in the next 7 years, trucking is gone. There won't be anybody driving trucking cars, and that's going to be the real test case.
I think we'll get smartphones in the context prior to everybody not having to drive at all.
I think it's a lot of simultaneous, but I mean, look at where Tesla's at right now. You can hands-free have Tesla drive on the road. So 16 years from now, just looking at Tesla.
But I guess my point is the human aspect of it. Are you still going to be able to need to know how to drive in case you need to take over, or it's 100% autonomous? Because that's still something that's not even, there's not even laws built around it just yet in terms of whose fault it is and all that.
No, but the reason why I think it's going to be so successful isn't for any other reason other than the
and nothing's
market
autonomous right now. Even like underground subways or planes, or obviously everything has at least like a conductor or someone that can take over, even though a lot of it's
standing
autopilot.
there. But I mean, I do think that the market opportunity for the first person who gets the first, approved, regulated autonomous vehicle is going to make so much money.
And you and I are driving to LA after this. It's going to be about a 2.5 hour trip both ways. And
imagine if we could be in the back of the car doing this
exactly.
the entire way.
Not
up
even
there.
this, but just be able to be on a laptop in the back of a Suburban.
Read a book.
Just going.
Yeah, I mean,
traffic or not, it stops when you need to. Yeah, it would be so convenient.
All that time spent where you've got to do it, and it's stressful. I think it leads people to be more stressed out if you're driving in traffic every single day to and from work.
Man, I don't think people would mind the 45-minute commute and maybe live a little outside where their job is cheaper and be able to buy a larger house because you don't have to get up early and stop and go traffic, and you just
if you got a coffee machine back there and you can eat your food and you can read the paper and you show up to work well prepared and rested. But yeah, it's the future.
All right, so we'll end episode 20 on this. The quote of the week. I'll let you start.
Quote of the week. It's only when the tide goes out that you discover who's been swimming naked. And that is from Warren Buffett.
You love you some Warren Buffett, man.
It's great. And I think the stock market is incredibly high right now. Tech stocks are at an all-time high. It's not me only that's thinking that at some point there's going to be a correction in tech, but it will be really interesting to see once all the fervor around, there's no such thing as bad money after tech. When things subside a little bit, I think there's going to be a few companies that get washed out.
To your point, Snapchat's not worth $24 billion. Well, then what's it worth? $14 billion, $9.5 billion. It just. I mean, LinkedIn sold for 20-odd billion, and Uber says they're worth 40, but it's just like a lot of just mythical.
Right. Well, numbers. And things are worth what people will pay for them. But I do think that there were a lot of people in 2006 that looked at shitty houses in weird parts of town that were selling for $750 and thought, really? So that's where I think we may be.
And the mindset's been like 300 million monthly users. Do you know how much money you can make if you advertise those 300 million? No, I don't.
Yeah. Well, because they're doing it now and they're not making enough to be profitable.
They're not making billions.
So,
yeah. My quote of the week is: don't be upset with the results you didn't get with the work you didn't do. With my journalism background, I tried hard to find who said this quote.
I know. I saw anonymous.
Anonymous.
Okay.
I could have sworn I could find it, but there you go.
Wherever you are out there, thank you for your quote.
We turn 21 next episode.
Woo!
And it looks like we will be getting our first interview as well. Our boy Chris Lynch from Everyday California.
We'll have to bring a little champagne to celebrate our 21st.
Yeah, he owns a company out here in San Diego. It'll be cool to talk to another entrepreneur, so it's not just me and you blowing smoke out here. But big appreciation to Lise, Auntie, and John for setting up the new studio and all their help with Entrepreneur Rap. Download us on iTunes. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Any final thoughts?
Thank you to Living Spaces for helping us.
A free
with
plug.
All
right.
Yeah.
There it is, episode 20. See you next week.